Welcome back to Sci-Fi Travelers, friends. In this episode, we'll be listening to the story of Benjamin and Elanor. It's a very enjoyable story, so stay with us until the end. Enjoy the show. When I was a child, she promised she would marry me. And now the alien vampire woman has returned. The rehearsal had reached the stage. Every rehearsal eventually reaches, where nobody remembers what they were rehearsing, and everyone is simply eating the food meant for tomorrow. Benjamin stood in the middle of it all with a folding chair under each arm, having been sent to fetch two and returned with the wrong two, and felt, for the first time in months, that his life had arranged itself into something close to right. The little house glowed, candles everywhere, because the power in this part of town flickered whenever the wind decided to have opinions, and Nora had declared that candles were romantic, and the outages were therefore free ambience. "You've put that chair down and picked it up 4 times, Nora said, not looking up from the seating chart spread across the table like a battle map. "Are you nesting?" "I'm supervising." "You're hovering." "Jack, is he hovering?" Jack lifted his glass toward the ceiling with the solemnity of a man addressing a congregation. "He hovers the way his people have always hovered. It's ancestral. Leave him his dignity." He had appointed himself head of wine quality assurance 3 hours ago and had been extremely thorough. "This one's good, by the way. This one's also good. I'm building a comparison." "You're building a headache," Nora said, but she was smiling, and Benjamin loved her for the way she smiled at people even while insulting them. Tomorrow he was going to marry her in the little stone church at the end of the lane, and the thought sat in his chest like a warm coal. He set the chairs down. He picked them up again. Nora threw a napkin at him. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. 3 sounds. Soft, spaced, deliberate, not the rattling knuckles of a neighbor come to borrow something, but 3 separate decisions to strike the wood. And with the third, every candle in the room leaned. All of them, at once, tilting their small flames sideways as though the house had drawn a slow breath through the gap beneath the door, and then straightening again when it let go. "Okay, that was weird," Jack announced. "Did anyone else feel the house inhale? Or is that the wine assuring its own quality?" "Probably Aunt Cora," Nora said. "She said she'd come by tonight if her knee behaved." Benjamin was already crossing to the door, wiping his palms on his trousers, rehearsing something warm and welcoming. He turned the handle. Cold poured in first. Not winter cold. It was spring outside, but a deeper cold. The specific cold of a night 20 years gone. Snow and black trees and small numb hands. She stood on the threshold. White skin, luminous in a way skin was not supposed to be, glowing faintly at its edges as though the candlelight were coming from inside her rather than landing on her. Golden eyes, ancient and steady, fixed on his face with a weight that made his knees forget their job. Pale hair falling past long, delicately pointed ears, and not a single year on her. Not one. She looked exactly, precisely, impossibly, as she had the night she'd warmed his frozen hands in the woods and vanished into the dark with a promise on her lips. Behind him, the room had gone silent. Even Jack, for the first time in living memory, had nothing to say. The woman's gaze did not waver. Her mouth opened, and she spoke one word, and it was his name. His name the way she had said it to a shivering boy, like it was something precious she had been carrying carefully for a very long time, and was finally setting down. Benjamin, and the years fell away between them like snow sliding off a rooftop, all at once, leaving only the 2 of them and the cold, and a promise neither had ever spoken aloud. "So," Jack whispered somewhere behind him, faint and awed. "Not Aunt Cora, then." Nobody moved. The woman stood in the doorway and Benjamin stood before her, and the candles slowly remembered how to burn upright. And for a long moment the only sound in the house was Jack setting his glass down very, very quietly, as though a loud noise might make her multiply. "You," Benjamin said. It was not much of a sentence. 20 years of telling himself it had been a dream, and this was the best his mouth could manage. I made you up. I decided I made you up. There were doctors involved in that decision." "You did not make me up," the woman said. Her voice had the same strange resonance he half remembered, as if a second, softer voice spoke a half-beat behind the first. "Though I understand why you tried. It is easier than the truth. Most things are." "Benjamin," Nora said, from somewhere near the table, in the careful tone of a person walking across a frozen lake. "Who is this?" And so, standing in his own doorway on the night before his wedding, Benjamin told them, haltingly at first, then faster, the way you confess a thing you've kept too long. He told them about the winter he was 7, when he'd wandered from his family's cabin chasing what he'd thought was a fox, and found instead the black heart of the woods, where the trees stopped whispering and the snow came up past his knees. How the cold had stopped hurting, which even at 7 he'd understood was a bad sign. How he had sat down in a drift, certain and strangely peaceful, and closed his eyes, and how a light had come through the trees. Not a lantern. A person, glowing, walking barefoot over snow that did not so much as dent beneath her. She had knelt and taken his small blue hands and folded them inside her own, and the warmth that came off her was impossible, endless, like being held up to a sun. She had spoken to him about stars. Not the ones overhead, she'd said, but others, far off, where she was from. And when his family's voices finally called through the dark, she had leaned close and made him a promise. That one day, when he was grown, she would come back for him. Then she was gone. And the searchers found a boy who should have been dead, warm as toast, babbling about a snow woman. Her name, Benjamin finished, was Elanor. "It still is," said the woman. Jack, who had been listening with his mouth progressively opening, finally spoke. Okay. I have questions. I have so many questions. Question 1. He raised a finger. On a scale of 1 to marriage, how legally binding was this childhood promise, and should Nora be worried? Jack. Question 2, and this is the important one. He leaned forward, squinting. You haven't aged. At all. And I'm not being nice. I'm being accusatory. My photos from 20 years ago are a warning label. What's your secret? And can I have it? And also, please don't be a serial killer. We have a wedding tomorrow. Elanor tilted her head at him, and the gesture was slightly wrong, a few degrees past what a neck should do, and everyone noticed and everyone pretended they hadn't. I do not age, she said simply, because I am not the same kind of thing that you are. The candle nearest her guttered low, and Benjamin saw. They all saw. That where its light should have caught her face, it instead passed through the edges of her, thin as paper held to a window, before her skin gathered it back in and glowed the brighter. Nora set down the seating chart. Right, she said, with the flat calm of a woman whose evening had comprehensively left the rails. I'm making tea. Everyone sit down. You, she pointed at Elanor, especially you. If you're going to ruin my wedding, you're doing it at the table like a person. The tea was Nora's answer to everything, and she made it now with the grim efficiency of a woman restoring order to a universe that had misbehaved. 4 cups. She set one before Elanor with the air of laying down a challenge. Elanor regarded it the way a person might regard a small animal that had been placed on the table for reasons unexplained. You drink it, Nora said. Why? Because it's hot, and it's kind, and it means we're all going to behave like civilized beings for the next 10 minutes. Nora sat. Also because I need something to hold, or I'm going to start screaming, and this is more dignified. Elanor lifted the cup. She studied the steam curling off it with genuine, unnerving fascination, as though it were a phenomenon she intended to file a report about later. Then she brought it to her mouth, drank, and went very still. This, she said, is warmth you can keep inside you. She sounded for the first time almost undone. Your people drink small suns and complain about the weather. You are magnificent, and you do not know it. It's from a bag, Jack said. It cost about nothing. Don't oversell us, we peak early. They settled, more or less, into something that resembled a conversation. And in the settling, the small wrongnesses of Elanor kept surfacing like stones in a field. She flinched, sharp and involuntary, when she passed the dark window and caught her own reflection, and would not sit where a mirror could see her. When Jack made a joke, a bad one, about the tea being the strongest thing at a wedding rehearsal where the groom was being courted by a glowing stranger. She did not laugh, but instead bowed her head with sudden reverence, as if a joke were a rite whose meaning she had not yet been taught, but knew to honor. "You keep doing that," Benjamin said gently. "The bowing, when Jack's being ridiculous. Among my kind, to make another's fear turn to laughter is a very old and very holy thing," Elanor said. "You do it constantly, carelessly, to strangers." She looked at Jack with something close to awe. "He is a priest and does not know it." "Finally," Jack breathed. "Recognition." But Benjamin was watching her hands. The glow that ran beneath her skin was not steady. It swelled and dimmed, like a lamp on a failing current, and each time it dimmed it seemed to take a little longer to come back. Twice she pressed her palm flat to the table as though to steady herself against a lurch no one else could feel. She was, he realized with a cold drop in his stomach, unwell, fading. Whatever she was made of was running low. "Elanor." He set his cup down. The kitchen went quiet under his voice. "Why now? I mean it. 20 years. Tomorrow I'm getting married. Of every possible night in 2 decades, you came to this one. That's not a coincidence. Nothing that walks through snow without touching it does coincidence." For a long moment she said nothing. The candle at her elbow guttered, flared, guttered. "No," she admitted at last, and the second voice beneath her voice had gone thin and frightened in a way that made the hair on his arms stand up. "I did not choose the night. I have not chosen anything for a long while now. The night was chosen for me." Her golden eyes came up and found his, and held. "I followed the one thread in this whole turning sky that I trusted would still be here. I followed it to your door." She wrapped both luminous hands around the warm cup, as if bracing. "And I am very much afraid," she said, "that something followed it too." Nobody drank their tea after that. It sat cooling in 4 cups while Elanor gathered herself, and when she spoke again, it was in the manner of someone who has decided that the truth, however large, has to be set down on the table and looked at. "You call things like me by many names," she said. "In your oldest stories I am the pale woman at the window, the one who does not age, who drinks the light out of a room. Vampire, some of you say." She almost smiled. "It is not wrong. It is only small. I do not drink blood. I drink light, and I drink memory, which is a kind of light your people carry without knowing. My kind were born beside a dying star and learned to live on the little we could gather. We were many once. We are almost none now." "Almost none," Nora repeated. "That's a lonely word." "It is the loneliest word there is." Jack raised a cautious hand. "Sorry, memory. You eat memory? Is that why I can never recall where I've put my keys? Have you been snacking on me for years? I have known you for 2 hours." "That's exactly what a memory thief would say." Elanor regarded him with the grave patience of a mountain enduring weather. "When you feed on memory," she went on, "you must be careful whose you take, because a memory can be a poison, or it can be a home. Most are neither. They are thin things, quickly gone." She turned her golden eyes on Benjamin, and the whole room seemed to lean toward the space between them. "But once, 20 of your years ago, I warmed a boy's hands in the snow, and I gave him something to hold. And he held it. All this time. Faithfully. Against doctors and reason and his own good sense, he kept it burning." "I told you there were doctors," Benjamin murmured. "A memory held that long, that brightly, becomes a fixed point," Elanor said. "A light that does not gutter. Across all that dark between the stars, with everything else in me failing, it was the one flame I could steer home by. Your remembering me, Benjamin, is the only reason I found my way back at all." Her voice dropped. "You were my lighthouse, and you never knew you were lit." The candles flickered. Even Jack had gone still. "That's the good part," Benjamin said slowly, because he had known her long enough even now to hear the shape of the thing coming. "What's the bad part?" "The bad part," Elanor said, is that a lighthouse can be seen by anything with eyes. She set her hands flat on the table, and her glow shuddered low. There is a thing that hunts my kind. It has fed on nearly all of us. Among the few of us left, it has no name we dare speak, only a shape, the pale hunt. It does not track by scent or by sound. It tracks by longing, by the bright, aching threads that bind one being to another across distance. And you, faithful boy. She looked at him with something close to grief. Kept the brightest thread I have ever seen burning for 2 decades, pointed straight at your own front door. The house was silent. Outside, the wind picked at the windows. So let me make sure I understand, Jack said carefully, because this affects tomorrow's schedule. Ben loved you so hard and so long that he accidentally sent up a flare, and now a galaxy-scale predator has RSVP'd to a wedding it was not invited to. Yes, said Elanor. Great. Jack picked up his cold tea and drank all of it. I'm going to need something stronger than quality assurance. It began with the dogs. Every dog in the town, all at once, stopped barking, a silence so total and so sudden that Benjamin felt it in his teeth. Then the candles did not lean this time. They stood straight up, taller than their wicks should allow, flames stretching toward the ceiling like they were trying to flee upward through the roof. That's new, Jack said. I didn't like the inhaling, and I like this even less. Elanor was already on her feet. Whatever fading thing had sat weary at the table was gone. She stood coiled and terribly awake, and the glow beneath her skin had pulled inward, bright and hard as a struck match. It's here, away from the windows. All of you. Now. The sky cracked. There is no better word for it. The night above the little house split with a sound like the world clearing an enormous throat, a low tearing groan that Benjamin felt in the floorboards and the fillings of his teeth. And through the gap poured a cold that made the earlier cold seem like a summer afternoon. The candles went out, everyone at once, and into the dark came a shape that the eye refused to hold. Not a monster with a face. Worse, an absence in the shape of a hunger, a place where the light bent away and did not come back, drifting through the wall as though the wall were a rumor. The pale hunt had arrived, and it was reaching for Elanor with something that was not quite a hand. She met it. What happened then, Benjamin would spend the rest of his life failing to describe. Elanor threw up her arms, and the light she had hoarded came out of her all at once, not as a glow now, but as a weapon. She bent it, folded it, drew it into blades and threw it, and where it struck the absence, the darkness recoiled and hissed. The room strobed white and black, white and black. He saw Nora seize the fire poker from the hearth. He saw, to his eternal astonishment, Jack seize the other fire poker, because apparently they owned 2, and take up a wide defensive stance beside her with the confidence of a man who had never won a fight in his life. I don't know what I'm doing, Jack bellowed, swinging at the dark, but I'm doing it with commitment. The hunt turned toward them, toward the warm, bright, delicious fear of the ordinary humans, and Benjamin understood in a plunging instant that it did not need to defeat Elanor. It only needed to eat what she loved, and it had found the buffet. Benjamin, the memory! Elanor cried, her voice fraying, her light guttering as fast as she spent it. It feeds on longing. Don't be afraid. Whatever you do, don't. But he was afraid. Of course he was afraid. And the hunt drank it, swelling, delighted, and reached for Nora with a tendril of pure nothing, and Nora hit it in the face with a fire poker. It did nothing. It also, somehow, did something, because the sheer human absurdity of it made Benjamin laugh, one wild, disbelieving bark of a laugh, and for a heartbeat the fear in his chest turned to something else, something warm and stupid and bright, and the hunt flinched from him as though scalded. Laughter, Elanor breathed, wonder cutting through her exhaustion. It cannot feed on. The hunt drew back, gathered itself. And where a face was not, Benjamin felt it fix its attention on him, patient and vast and certain, filing him away for later. Then it folded down into a single point and was gone, and the crack in the sky sealed behind it with an oily shudder, and the candles, one by one, guttered back to life. 4 people stood breathing hard in a wrecked kitchen. "So," Jack panted, lowering his poker. "Same time tomorrow, or—" They cleaned up because there was nothing else to do with their hands. Nora swept broken crockery into a dustpan with the vengeful precision of a woman reclaiming her home from the cosmos. Jack retired both fire pokers to the hearth with a little pat, thanking them for their service. And Elanor sat in the wreckage, dimmer than Benjamin had yet seen her, the glow beneath her skin down to embers, having spent nearly everything she had, keeping the dark off the people she'd brought it to. It was almost dawn. The candles burned low and honest. "I have to say the thing," Benjamin said finally, "because someone did, and he was the one it belonged to." He looked at Nora, who he was supposed to marry in a church at the end of the lane in a matter of hours. He looked at Elanor, who had knelt in the snow 20 years ago and given a dying boy a reason to live and a promise he had built his whole secret heart around. "I don't know what I'm— There are 2. He stopped, started again. "This is the worst possible night for this." "Benjamin," Nora said, "if you are about to stand in our kitchen and agonize over which of us gets to keep you, like you are the last slice of cake at a party, I will hit you with the poker myself. I've warmed it up now. That's not—" "You are not a prize," Nora said, gentler, setting down the dustpan. "I'm not standing here waiting to find out whether I've won you. I chose you. That's a different thing, and it doesn't come undone because a woman made of starlight rang the bell." She turned to Elanor. "And you. Did you come here to marry him? Actually. Is that the promise?" Elanor looked at the 2 of them for a long moment, and something in her ancient face eased and broke, and eased again. "No," she said. "I told a frightened child I would come back for him, because he needed to believe someone in the universe would. I did not come to take his life from him. I came because his was the only door in all the turning dark I trusted would open." Her dim eyes found Benjamin's. "I never wanted to be your future. I only wanted once to not be entirely alone. And you were the one who never let me be." Benjamin discovered he could breathe again. The knot he had carried for 20 years. Is she real? Does she want me? What do I owe a promise? Simply came undone, and underneath it was something far simpler and far larger. Not a claim, a trust. "Okay," Jack said, from where he'd been quietly listening with a broom. "Genuinely lovely, truly. But I feel obligated to point out that the Galaxy Predator is still coming back, and it looked at Ben like a man who'd forgotten to cancel a subscription. So, plan?" "We stop running," Elanor said. "That's not a plan. That's the opposite of a plan." It fed on Benjamin's fear and recoiled from his laughter. Elanor rose, unsteady but certain, the embers under her skin stirring. "It cannot take what is given freely and without terror. It only knows how to hunt longing. It has never in all its ages met a thing that turned and offered itself gladly, unafraid and laughing." She almost smiled. "We do not flee the lighthouse. We light it brighter. And we wait." "You want to use Ben as bait," Nora said flatly. "I want to use all of us as bait," Elanor said. "The Predator has never encountered people like you. Neither, frankly, have I." She looked at the poker, at the tea, at the wedding chairs still stacked in the corner. "You are absurd and warm, and you keep small suns in bags. I think you may be the most dangerous thing in the sky." They set the trap in the church. It was Nora's idea, and it was a good one. Because if they were going to bait a galaxy-spanning predator with the brightest thread of longing it had ever tasted, they might as well do it in the building where the whole town was already coming at noon to watch Benjamin get married. "We're not canceling the wedding," she'd said, hands on hips. "We've paid for the flowers." And so, as the morning warmed and the bells rang, the little stone church filled with people who had no idea they were the ambush. Elanor stood at the altar in borrowed clothes, dim as a banked fire, and waited. It came at noon, when the vows would have been. The dogs went silent, the candles stood straight, and the sky cracked open above the steeple, spilling its cold, and the pale hunt poured down through the roof toward the one bright thread it had crossed an ocean of dark to eat. Benjamin, standing alone at the center of the aisle, terrified out of his mind. "Now," Elanor said, and Benjamin did the thing they had planned, which was to stop being afraid, not by pretending. You cannot lie to a thing that eats longing, but by choosing. He looked up at the vast, reaching absence, and instead of clutching his fear, he let it go. And he thought about a glowing woman kneeling in the snow to save a boy she owed nothing, and about Nora hitting the apocalypse with a fireplace tool, and about Jack, a priest who did not know it, and he laughed. Freely, gladly. He turned his lighthouse all the way up and offered it without one flicker of terror. The hunt lunged to feed, and found nothing it could hold, no fear to swell on, only a memory given away with both open hands, warm and unafraid and absurd, and it recoiled, starving in the middle of a feast. And then the whole town, whom Nora had quietly briefed with the 6 most insane sentences of her life, did the thing she'd asked. They laughed. 200 people on cue, laughing at the dark, a congregation of accidental priests. The pale hunt, ancient and vast and never once in all its ages fed freely, could not survive a room that would not fear it. It thinned. It guttered. Elanor stepped forward, and with the last of her light and the offered warmth of every soul in that church, folded it down into a single cold point, and closed her luminous hands around it, and it was simply gone. The crack in the sky sealed. The candles caught. It cost her. When the light cleared, Elanor sat on the altar steps nearly transparent, her glow spent to almost nothing, but not gone. Alive and lighter than Benjamin had ever seen her, 20,000 years of being hunted lifted off her shoulders at last. "You'll recover?" he asked, kneeling. "Slowly, on tea apparently. I'll require a great deal of tea." She looked at him and finally spoke the vow aloud, the one neither of them had ever named. "I promised to come back for you. I did not understand then that the promise was never mine to keep. It was yours. You kept me. You held the light so I could find my way home." Her thin hand touched his. "That was the vow. Thank you for keeping it." Benjamin married Nora an hour late, which the guests agreed was the least strange thing about the afternoon. Jack gave a toast so long that Elanor bowed her head through the entire thing, honoring the rite. And that night, when the party guttered down to embers, the 4 of them stood in the yard and looked up at a sky that had, for the first time in an age, nothing hunting through it. "There are others of my kind still out there," Elanor said softly. "Scattered, hidden, afraid." A road of stars opened overhead, quiet and enormous and waiting. "They don't yet know it's safe to come home." Benjamin took his wife's hand and looked at the woman who had once thawed his frozen fingers in the snow and smiled up at all that dark. "Then we'd better keep the light on." Long after the wedding candles had burned down to pools of soft wax, long after the guests had gone home carrying a story none of them would ever quite believe they'd lived, a single light stayed on in a small house at the end of a quiet lane. And somewhere far above it, in the cold between the stars, a scattered and frightened people began, one by one, to turn toward it, because someone down there had refused to let the dark have the last word. That, in the end, is what Benjamin learned. That the things we hold on to, the promises we're told, were only dreams. The people who touched our lives for a single winter and vanished. The small, faithful flames we keep burning when everyone tells us to let them die. Those things are never as small as they seem. He kept one memory alight for 20 years, and it turned out to be a lighthouse. He never knew he was lit. So let me leave you with the question the story leaves me with. What light are you keeping burning without knowing it? Who, somewhere out in your own turning dark, is steering home by a warmth you gave them long ago and forgot? And what would it mean? What would it change? To believe that the things you refuse to let go of are not weaknesses at all, but the very beacons that keep the ones we love from being lost forever. Maybe the promise someone made you wasn't a dream. Maybe you're someone else's promise still waiting to be kept. The end. We've reached the end of another adventurous sci-fi traveler story, friends. Please don't forget to hit the like button, leave your thoughts about the story in the comments below, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler for more stories. See you in the next Sci-Fi Traveler story.